self-love and acceptance, basically just through, okay, perfect, thank you. Just through being open and listening to these experiences, you're already gaining the knowledge. So I think when the knowledge is presented, as long as you're open and you are willing to listen with an open heart and kind of lean into it, because it can be a little uncomfortable, especially if someone is challenging like a certain, thought that we've had all our lives, and someone's presenting conflicting information. It can be a little tense, but lean into that. I think that really helps us grow, is just looking at things in a different way and just being open and ask questions. Okay. Next. So, did you know that the BMI is racist? The BMI is the bariatric body mass index. A lot of folks are, alarmed by this title of this section, but it's not as, I guess, outlandish when I present the facts. The BMI was created by a man named Adolf Huxley, and he wrote a thing called A Treaty of Man in the Development of His Faculties in 1835. So basically what Huxley did was take a look, he's from Europe, so he looked at what he called the average man. So this was a person who was French or Scottish, and Huxley tried to look at his measurements, look at his I'm blanking, like his brain mass and all of that, and apply that to 90% of the population. He said, this is 90% of the population, the average man. And basically what he said was that anything out of this, if you're looking at a bell curve, 90% would be smack dab in the middle. It's the median. And then you have the 5% to the right and the 5% to the left. These are outliers. And so basically what Huxley said was, if anyone is in the outlier section, they're not right. Something's wrong. In the 20th century, Huxley's writings, his Treaty of a Man, became used to justify eugenics. Eugenics is the systematic sterilization of a person. In this time, it's disabled people, mentally, developmentally different people, immigrants, poor people, people of color. So from the start, this system, this index, was used to ostracize a whole bunch of groups of people. So eugenics is already pretty racist. Then it kind of, I want to say it kind of went under the radar. It was still being kind of used. It was being used by physicians in the 50s and 60s. It was used to determine health based on height and weight. And if you know the BMI, I'm sure we all have heard of it. Our doctors talk to us about it, especially if we're trying to lose weight, or it's on so many different things. I know I first encountered it when I was probably like 12. So physicians use it and they say, okay, if you're a woman and you're 5'5", you should be 110 pounds, because you will have 18.5% body fat or what have you. Sorry, I can hear somebody. So this has been used by physicians. Then as the 70s came in, insurance companies started using it. They basically used it to charge folks with higher BMIs, higher premiums. So this was a way of systematically oppressing any groups that didn't fall within this mean. Who wouldn't fall into this mean? Well, he used French and Scottish participants. So anybody who's not French or Scottish probably won't fall into this mean. we can think of like Hungarians probably have a higher BMI, Samoans have a higher BMI, basically anyone who was not this ideal test subject. If we look at it scientifically, this small percentage of survey people cannot really be generalized. So right off the bat, people of color or people that aren't within this standard are being charged with a higher with higher premiums. Then in the 80s and up until now, the BMI has been used to determine the obesity standard. For example, women who have a BMI of like 18.5 to 24.9 are seen as normal, but those with a BMI of 25 to 29.9 are seen as obese. So it's pretty arbitrary, because you can be a woman who's 5'5", who's all muscle, and have a 25% BMI for whatever reason, if you have bigger legs or a bigger butt, and they would see you as obese. So let's look at how it's used presently.
Yeah.
Presently, the BMI, as I stated, is still used heavily in the medical community. We've all heard it. We've all probably at one point or another had some run-ins where we're feeling like we may not be on the spectrum or somewhere else on the spectrum. I know when I was 12, I got into looking at the BMI because when I was 12, I had a higher BMI than I thought I should. And of course, I have no medical training to look at this chart, but it's readily available. And I really started internalizing that. And I brought it to my doctor's attention. And thankfully, I had a knowledgeable doctor who doesn't just look at the BMI as your overall health, and he, looks into other factors, but he let me know, no, you're fine. But I say that to say, think of the other children of color or the other little girls who may not fall within this mean. It really starts taking a toll on you at an early age. I know a lot of the girls I hung out with started, developing eating disorders around that time. And it was all linked to, because this is so readily available, it was linked to false misconceptions. The BMI is still used by insurance companies, and it's used by consumer products. So diet pills, fad diets, fat burners, they use this insecurity that we have linked to this very limited index to push products that are guaranteed to help us drop our BMI, and it's very damaging. Our hopes for the future, after looking at this and reading an article, I really have the hope that eventually the BMI will be thrown out. Right now, there's still no consensus of another system to really monitor weight and body or weight and fat as it relates to health. But I say that to say, we don't have to always look at weight to determine how healthy we are. I think one of the things I've been grateful for is having a doctor that is able to get to know me and is able to look at my daily activities and determine what's right for me, not based on, this BMI, this higher BMI that I have, but based on things that she knows about me. I know that this is asking a lot because doctors, right now we're in an integrated health system, and doctors are just quickly seeing their patients and then passing them off to the nurse. But I think with the little steps, doctors can get to know their patients and we can make better recommendations. I hope that medical racism can be eradicated. So I think we need to get away from using archaic ways of talking about health or using even predatory language, I guess, to talk about health. And that really targets a certain group or puts a certain group on the outs. I think that would be nice. And then undoing the idea that skinny equals healthy. Of course, you can be skinny and healthy, but you can also be very skinny and unhealthy. I think we need to find other non-weight ways to measure how healthy we are, and find quantifiable means to, measure our health. So next, we are going to talk about the brief history of SSGG Sarah Bartman. Hopefully, we know a little bit about her. I feel like as of recently, she's been coming more and more into pop culture, and we've kind of been learning more about her. Let's see. So, SSGG is also known as Sarah Bartman, or the Hottentot Venus. So SSGG, well, let me call her Sarah. Sarah was a member of the Khoi people in South Africa, and she came, a British doctor came and basically stole her from her people in 1810. The Khoi is like a small tribe, so yeah, he came, took her from her small tribe, and basically began parading her all around Europe, as in these freak shows. Now, she was seen as a freak because she had, as the picture kind of illustrates, she had large bosoms and a very large butt and an elongated labia. And so she wasn't what the European women looked like. She looked so different. And she appeared in many different human freak shows. And basically they were human circuses. She would emerge from a cage looking, animalistic or what have you, and they would kind of treat her like a lion and try to tame her. She was eventually sold to an animal trader, and then she was kind of taken around to these high society balls as entertainment. So her body, because she had large bosom and a large butt, she was seen as just being oversexed and animalistic, and this really reinforced a lot of the racist notions around Africans at that time. So, and this is, as she's going around being paraded and being dehumanized, she's actually picking up knowledge as she goes. So the amazing thing was that Sarah was able to learn 4 different languages while she was out, but she was still seen as non-human, animalistic, and barbaric, which is crazy because she learned 4 languages. That's pretty dope. Eventually, there was a case brought up that she should not be exhibited. The opposition argued that she was fully complacent and wanted to be exhibited, but the court ruled that she can no longer be exhibited. And so that had stopped. However, she did get into prostitution and alcohol, and she died 5 years later after being captured at 25. She died in poverty and a prostitute with alcoholism. After she passed away, the atrocities did not stop. Her body was then dissected and, poked and prodded by other doctors, and her genitalia was preserved. Also, her body they made a cast of her body and put it up in the museum, and then she wasn't returned to South Africa until about 2002 under Nelson Mandela. When I think of Sarah, I think of another Black woman who was kind of dissected and used for science when that wasn't the purpose of her being around, Henrietta Lacks. And I think recently, actually, with this vaccine, in Europe, it was, suggested that we test the vaccine out on African people in Africa, and people were really upset because it seems as history is just repeating itself. African people or Black women or African women are continually being used without being used for science, without being seen as human at this point. You know, they just said, "Oh yeah, it was on a British like news show." They were like, "Why don't we go to Africa and test it out?" And people were like, "Why is that your first instinct to just go test this out on a people? Whether, you know, they're your people or not, they're still a human." And so when I think of the consumption of Black bodies, I often think about it in a medical sense. You know, gynecological advances were made because of testing out on Black women. And so this is just something that keeps showing up in our history, and we really, I mean, hey, we're supposed to be modernized. We really need to do something about it and push back. And so that's something that just comes to mind whenever I think of Sarah Bartman. How the Black female body is seen presently. After Sarah Bartman died, and remember, she was called a freak and all of this, and she was paraded and being called animalistic. After she died, bustle dresses began to rise to popularity. Bustle dresses, if you remember, they're pretty tight in the bodice, but they do sit your bosoms up, and then you have this extra layer of, I believe it's like a bustle, so it's a cage, and then another like padding on top of that, and that's on your butt, and then your dress flows over that. So it really resembled Sarah Bartman's body. And it's funny because, well, it's not funny, but it's ironic that it was something that was seen so animalistic when it was on this woman, but it slowly became a view of high society. Women in high society would wear those dresses to show that they were in high society, to show that they were regal, to show that they were feminine, and it's just really sad. Eurocentric standards of beauty give a rise to self-hate. So we've seen more and more, of course, America is based on Eurocentric standards, and so oftentimes Afrocentric features are deemed unprofessional or just unappealing when it's on a Black body. I have a picture here. This is of a MAC model, so she's modeling the lipstick, and some of the comments are just terrible. Some of the people called her, you know, a baboon lips, ape lips, what have you. And during this time that this ad ran, coincidentally, it was during the Kylie Jenner lip kits and the Kylie Jenner lip challenge, where people were literally plumping their lips until they busted. And so it's sad to see, but I think being a Black woman, I've seen it so much that it's not surprising. But it just reinforces the fact that Afrocentric features are only beautiful when they are on a non-Black woman or a non-woman of color. The music industry also perpetuates this stereotype. For example, I could say like Iggy Azalea and her fake butt rapping about sex, and then Nicki Minaj and her fake butt rapping about the same thing, yet Nicki Minaj gets called all these names while Iggy Azalea is still held up to a different standard. And I have some pictures here. We have the bustle dress. Of course, we got Kim Kardashian, the ultimate consumer of Black bodies. And I also have to the right, this is just a recent trend. It's called blackfishing. And it's lately, white, it's usually European, so like Russian, I think both of them are Russian. Women have been using self-tanner to get really dark, and then they get things like braids, and they try to pass as black. One of the reasons why I think, I don't know why it's gotten so popular, but one of the reasons why it just strikes me as so degrading is that at any moment they can go back and just wipe it off and be white women. But it's like, I can't do that. I can't, self tan or change and be a white woman and negate my experience as a black woman. I can't do that. And so it's disheartening, and it's kind of sad. They should be able to be themselves and love themselves in their own beauty and not have to pretend to be somebody else. Our vision for the future, basically just to shed light on the root of these behaviors. Like I said, they've been going on for a long time. They are still prevalent. Lately, it's been more, I guess, folks think it's appreciation versus appropriation or a real negative thing. But being in the Black community, I see it as not appreciation. Recently, Ivy Park, Beyonce's clothing line, put out an ad or had different influencers with their Ivy Park on, and she has people of all races, all genders, ethnicities, and somehow her team posted a picture of these two women blackfishing, and people were really upset. But then I went under, and they kept the picture up, and then I went under the picture to look at the comments, and a lot of it was from other European women, like, why are you guys so mad? This is appreciation. Don't you understand? We're appreciating you, so we want to be like you. And I feel like it's just a tone deaf attempt. Like, if you think that's appreciation, when someone's telling you it's not, the person being affected, you have to listen. It's tone deaf. It's will for ignorance at that point. And so, just shedding the light on these roots of these behaviors and making sure we elevate the beauty of Black people as experienced by Black people. So listening to the experience of your Black friend and elevating them and honoring them. Shifting the belief around where beauty lives. So beauty is, more than just your outer appearance. It's definitely within. And I think we need to shift those beliefs. And then just Blackness needs to be more respected as stuff other than consumable. Yes, some people are like, well, being Black is cool. Okay, but there's also daily struggles that we wake up and face. And so it's not just the things that you can pick and choose from. Because at the end of the day, as a Black woman, I don't get to pick and choose my experience. I get the good, the bad, and the ugly. And so I don't get to cherry pick what I experience on which day. Let's see. Ooh. All right. So this last section, it's just really about radical self-love by embracing, Black hair and other physical and non-physical elements of Black experience. And I recently had an experience with this, and so I definitely want to share it with y'all. I am currently engaged. I'm looking at venues, and I have, right now my hair is in twists and like little buns, but usually like I wear an afro. And the place that we were going to look at was a country club. And so when I messaged the woman, she was like, yeah, we'd love to show you, just come in country club attire. So me and my partner are like, what is country club attire? So we hit up my grandma and she let us know, but I was really concerned about my hair, because my hair is not country club attire. People see my hair and they think like, oh, she's a radical, she's wearing an afro, like, oh my gosh, she's gonna start like a Black Panther march right now. And so I have a blonde wig. I love my wig. It's like a cute, like, Karen cut. I love it. It's blonde and brown, but my partner hates it. And so I was like, I'm going to wear my wig. And he was like, why? And I was like, because I don't want to seem, I guess I want to say, like, I don't want to seem too Black. Like, I want to seem like I could fit in here at this country club. Granted, I'm not trying to be a member, but I want to have my wedding there. So I don't want them to have any concerns. And, you know, he was like, I'm sorry that you feel like that. And he was like, but, you know, I don't think you should wear it. And I was like, I'm going to wear it. So I looked for it and I couldn't find it. I'm pretty sure he threw it away, but I ended up just, you know, doing my hair kind of as neutral as I could, to not seem intimidating. And I was thinking about this, as much as I do have love for, you know, my Blackness and the Black experience, at this moment, I really felt like I had to align with Eurocentric standards of beauty because I wanted to fit in. And this is an experience that I've had most of my life. And so, thank God I have a partner who's very adamant about me being, you know, true to myself. But at that moment, I was willing to slap that wig on. I did not care. I was like, I want to secure this venue. So, that kind of leads me into this next topic of just relaxer history and how Eurocentric features have always meant progress, especially within the Black community. So in 18th century, you know, Black women's hair, I mean, it says was seen, but no, my hair is very wool-like. It's very big. It's very fluffy. It's soft like a cotton ball, and it reaches to the sky. You know, it doesn't fall flat. But smooth straight hair has kind of always been more favorable to, you know, my type of hair. And for most of my life, I did wear my hair straight or in braids or in straight weaves. So I definitely get it. So in 1845, hot combs were invented by the French. And a hot comb is kind of like a flat iron, but it's a comb that you set on the burner, and then you could straighten your hair. But it's the same mechanism as a hair straightener, a flat iron. In the 1900s, Madam C.J. Walker, who was the first Black millionaire, invented the press and curl style. So press and curl, basically you press out hair with a hot comb and then you put rollers in it, and it keeps it straight for longer. This is, granted it's only a few days, but it keeps it straight and it looks nice. My grandma still gets press and curls. This has been around for so long, and it's like the Black woman's go-to, basically. And then in 1945, Garrett Morgan created a permanent relaxer for men. So we call them perms. For non-Black folks, I know, you know, a perm makes your hair curly, but for us, a perm makes our hair straight. And so these were created for men, and then there was so much popularity, women started using them, and Garrett, Mr. Morgan, officially made women's relaxers. And it's funny now because more relaxers are for women now than for men. In the 1960s, Black music groups, boy bands, girl bands, you know, began to rise. So like people like the Supremes or Little Richard, you know, they had their hair either in a pompadour or a bouffant. And so folks started to emulate what their hair looked like and would use wigs or relaxers and a lot of chemicals to straighten their hair. And then Afro started to become a thing, but only for a few groups. So afros were popular among people like activists, so like Angela Davis and the Black Panther movement, or hippies back in the 70s, and jerry curls became a trend. And a jerry curl it's like a mullet, but wet, and you have to put a lot of activator in it. Relaxers are still used today, but less and less now that we have the natural hair movement. And I do have a picture of probably every Black girl's first relaxer. It's called Just For Me. And so we start relaxing our kids' hair really, really young. I think I had my first relaxer at 6. So this just goes to show you how much kind of this hair hate is embedded in us. People say it makes it more manageable, but it changes the chemical makeup of your hair, and it's super dangerous. So that's our hair. This is just a condensed look at colorism. As I said in the last slide, Eurocentric features kind of mean progress. And so that also has to do with skin color. A lot of times, lighter skinned folks are seen as, better, more successful, smarter, while darker skinned people are seen as brutish or stupid or ugly. Colorism exists within all people of color groups. I just had this conversation with my sister. This isn't a Black thing. This isn't a white thing. This is within all people of color groups. You'll see it in India. You'll see it in the Philippines. You'll see it in other Asian cultures, where in India, for example, the lowest caste system are darker skinned Indians, while the highest caste system are the lighter skinned Indians. Colorism is a form of internalized hate. So there's racism that's outside of group, and then colorism, which is within group. And it did start in slave times, but that's where it started here. Of course, like I said, this is within all people of color groups. So I'm going to say it probably started with the expansion of Christianity, just as people started exploring more territory. This kind of, light is good, dark is bad went through. Black men, talking about back in America, Black men internalize stereotypes around dark-skinned women a lot. I would say dark-skinned women maybe, but not as much. I think we receive a lot of hate from our darker skin counterparts, a lot. And it's not even just like, oh, you're ugly. It's some pretty degrading stuff. This is embedded within our culture, and I have a video on the next slide. It's called the doll study. The sound doesn't come through, so I'm going to kind of preface it before I click on to the next slide. But the doll study was first started in the 90s, and then they replicated it in the early 2000s. It's basically, they show 2 different dolls, so a black doll and a white doll, to children, right? Black kids, white kids, and they ask them a few questions. So they ask the question of which doll is the bad doll? And, the little black girl pointed at the black doll. And then the researcher said, which doll is the doll that looks like you? And the little girl pointed at the black doll. And so it was found that Black children attribute ugliness and stupidity, basically all those things that were mentioned before, brutish, well, they don't know what brutishness means, but stupidity and ugliness to the black dolls, even though they also see themselves in the black dolls. So it's pretty disheartening. We are actually going to embed the link. Sorry. We're going to embed the link to this video in the room called the Playroom, and it's just to the east of us. So I want you to think, and feel free to answer this. Like I said in the messages, I will stop in a few minutes and we'll get to questions. But when you think of that, what I just told you, what comes up for you when you think of the little black girl seeing herself in this black doll, but also seeing it as ugly or bad or stupid? And then think of how, well, compare and see if you recognize this bias within your daily interactions. We all have an implicit bias. And so oftentimes this comes up even when we are 100% doing everything we can to be anti-racist. Because we live in America, for most of us that live in America, I know there's some that don't, because of how our society is kind of structured, we kind of have an implicit bias. And it influences our daily interactions with folks. Okay. So how Black beauty is seen presently. As of recently, the Crown Act has been passed in California, New Jersey, New York, Maryland, Colorado, Washington, and the list can continue as it's presently continuing to be passed. So it is illegal for employers to discriminate against natural hairstyles. However, it is still legal for schools to discriminate against children with natural hairstyles. So I think you've seen that in the news recently, like kids with locks or afros being sent home and told that their hair is unkempt or inappropriate. So we still have a ways to go. There has been a return to the love of natural black hair. Also, I think more importantly, there's been a consensus that Black women now can do whatever they want with their hair. Granted, I am natural and I love being natural, but I think just giving that agency back to Black women, that they don't have to align with any of these standards of beauty, is more important. That you could do whatever. The weave industry has still seen a boom, the weave and wig industry, and unfortunately, it still exploits Black folks' insecurity, but it's also exploiting the Indian women who offer up their hair, usually for religious purposes, and it gets used in that good Indian hair that women go out and buy for weaves, and they're not getting a fair wage. They're not getting a living wage for this, yet their hair is being sold. I know homegirls that'll buy like weave for $600, $800. So these women, these Indian women who are giving up their hair, are not being fairly compensated. And it kind of encourages Black people to participate in this capitalistic consumerism and be a part of this wheel, while still exploiting both Black and brown people. Color